Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we are going to be finishing up our retrospective look at the original Blood Wulf miniseries with Blood Wulf number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in May of 1995, we can see the cover has Blood Wulf riding his space motorcycle, jet cycle thing through the dark reaches of space. Keep in mind, this craft also doubles as an absurdly large shoulder-mounted laser cannon. And also he carries this, much more reasonable laser pistol. Overall, it looks pretty good. It doesn't really have any connection to what's going on with the interior and the story, but it's a decent looking image, and I think it's a pretty good cover overall. Writer, Andy Mangels. Artist, Derek Gross Sr. Colorist, Gloria Vasquez. Color separations, in color. Lettering, Tim Harkins. Editor, Eric Stevenson. Associate editor, Kurt Hathaway. Blood Wulf created by Rob Liefeld. The story starts off in the deep reaches of space where we see a small dog that has the Blood Wulf face paint on, just kind of floating through space as it pees. And the owner of that dog, who looks suspiciously similar to Blood Wulf, asks the dog if it's finished yet as it pulls it in, and then starts to talk about the fact that they can't believe that Red got herself kidnapped by the regime, and also that, at least she was able to get a distress signal out to Blood Wulf and that he should be able to help. But, more or less, this person and their associate, who are riding crafts very similar to what Blood Wulf rides, are a little bit concerned that their help is going to be needed as they zoom through space to try and lend some aid. We're then shot back to the situation that we saw at the end of issue 3, where Dr. Gale is stuck in some sort of force field, and both of the droids and Ogo are out cold. Their circuitry apparently disabled, and Ogo actually suffered a blast from a laser pistol that has done even more damage to his synthetic body. Meanwhile, the commanding officer, who we also first met in the previous issue, has stated that Blood Wulf is actually not dead, as his friends feared. He's just been teleported away. Dr. Gale states, well, what are you going to do with us then? Dress me in skimpy outfits and make me your slave and whatnot? And the commander responds, no, actually, I was just going to eat you. However, his subordinate says, I don't know, let's hear out on this whole skimpy outfit thing. Meanwhile, outside of the dome, a sea serpent with a rider has spotted the people inside and states, that's them, let's get them. We then see that the sea serpent has rammed into the dome as the young rider states, you killed our friend Billy the Squid, which is in reference to the squid that Blood Wulf killed previously. And the sea serpent says, yeah, that makes us sore. At this point, everyone is in a complete panic as the dome suffers a very large crack, and everyone who lives inside of the dome realizes that they're all in mortal danger. This boy and Sea Serpent are supposed to be the characters Billy and Cecil. Billy and Cecil started out as a puppet show on ABC and then later became an animated TV series, which I only have the vaguest of memories about. I think I might have seen 1 or 2 episodes of Billy and Cecil ever. Strangely enough, Billy and Cecil, the animated series, was one of the first 3 ever color television shows that were broadcast on ABC, the other 2 being the Flintstones and the Jetsons, which does ask the question, why is Billy and Cecil not remembered more? Why is it not a bigger part of our popular culture, given that the other 2 are very much so? Granted, there's no Billy and Cecil vitamin line of, children's chewables that people have been taking for decades. And I think the bigger reasoning is because that Billy and Cecil is not owned by Hanna-Barbera. It was created by a man named Bob Clampett, who apparently did not get his hands on any of his family's oil money. That was a Beverly Hillbillies joke, folks. You're welcome to anybody who got it. But it's the idea that this was more of an independent thing and not part of a wider cartoon universe that dominated American children's television for decades. And even to this day, I mean, when you've got properties like the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo and, the Powerpuff Girls and all sorts of other, prominent Cartoon Network television shows, it's easy to see why the Jetsons and the Flintstones are still very much in the public consciousness, whereas something like Billy and Cecil is almost forgotten to an extent. We are then teleported back to the regime space station where Blood Wulf's mother is being held captive, as we see she is restrained with an apparatus that keeps her eyes open, as the evil Vas Deferens holds her in front of a window and makes her look down to see her son being tortured, as he states that this is the most exquisite of pain that can exist, a mother having to watch her child be harmed. We see that also he has Blood Wulf restrained with all kinds of chains and bindings and electrodes hooked to him, as he has his shins beaten on by none other than Tanya Harding, Sean Eckert, and Jeff Gillooly. Now, Eckert was Tanya Harding's bodyguard, and Jeff Gillooly was her ex-husband. As he continues to go on a ridiculous diatribe that makes almost no sense, he's interrupted by Blood Wulf's mother, who states, "Do you ever make sense at all?" He then goes into another long-winded speech that he speaks of a past that he has with Blood Wulf, and that this is really all about trying to get even with a former adversary. He then decides that he's had enough of all this, as he leaves and tells his subordinate to inform the torturers to finish off Blood Wulf, to which Tanya Harding responds, "Got it." Now, I should point out that this, of course, would have been more poignant in 1995, this joke about the three of them beating up on Blood Wulf's legs. However, it is important to note that neither Gillooly or Eckert were actually the individuals who struck Nancy Kerrigan in the leg. They actually hired another guy named Shane Stant to carry out that attack. And really, Gillooly was the mastermind behind the whole thing, in terms of the one that planned out everything in the attack. And while Tanya Harding did know of it, she didn't really have a whole lot of input in organizing it, nor was she really the one that got into any of the grisly details. Not trying to excuse her involvement in any way, but I mean, she's definitely, guilty in trying to sabotage a competitor in the Olympics. But the whole plan came from the fact that Gillooly and Eckert realized that the winner of the Olympic gold would get about roughly $1 million or so worth of endorsements after the fact. So basically, they were just trying to get their hands on that money by making sure that Nancy Kerrigan wouldn't be able to compete in the Olympics, which, by the way, they failed at. She was able to compete in the Olympics. More importantly, Tanya Harding didn't even medal, and Nancy Kerrigan didn't win. She got the silver that year. So the whole idea that they were going to take out one person from the field, get Tanya Harding in the Olympics, and then magically she was going to win the whole competition, that it didn't make sense at the outset of this. And the fact that they went through all this trouble of, attacking and assaulting a woman on the off chance that then the person that's involved in their scheme was going to somehow just walk into the Olympics and beat the entire field and then leave with millions of dollars worth of contracts, and that nobody was going to look into any of this and think, hey, I wonder if maybe these jokers had anything to do with the attack, was crazy. These people were morons. I even love the fact that they have Eckart rambling about all of this crazy spy training that he received. That was something he was known for, was this idea that he talked to this game of how he had been trained in all these different martial arts and secret spy techniques and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, as a bodyguard, he was running his bodyguard business out of his parents' home. I mean, this guy was literally just making stuff up and then somehow was being paid by Gillooly to protect his wife from, I don't know, things, because really prior to Gillooly attacking Nancy Kerrigan, Physical assault wasn't exactly something that was in the forefront of people's minds when it came to, amateur or professional figure skaters. Meanwhile, back in the dome, as Cecil continues to assault the dome, cracking and damaging it more and more with every strike, he accidentally knocks out the force field that was holding Dr. Gale and the droids. Gale immediately tries to reactivate Ogo as the commander, whose name we actually never get throughout all of this, yells that the dome's about to burst. As Ogo shoots up, he's shocked that he's still alive, but Gale informs him that his body is heavily damaged and that it's not going to last much longer. The two droids then reactivate, and Smood panics as he sees what's going on. At this point, Gale and Ogo jump into action as Gale takes out a regime soldier, and Ogo grabs a nearby fishwoman that they can hopefully use to get some information from. However, when he hits her, he accidentally knocks her head clean off and realizes that she has a synthetic body just the same as him. Meanwhile, Smood and Oidoy are trying to figure out where it was that Blood Wulf was teleported to, but the information is not stored in the computers. So at this point, Gale points the gun at the commander and his subordinate and demands to know where they sent Blood Wulf. The subordinate informs her that he was sent to the Dark Orb and then tells Dr. Gale, if you're going to kill us, just go ahead and do it, because if you don't, we're just going to be crushed by millions and millions of tons of water when the dome bursts anyway. Back on the Dark Orb space station, Tanya Harding has decided that even though she's supposed to be using this opportunity to kill Blood Wulf, that she's going to torture him some more by shaving his head. Blood Wulf states you don't want to do that, and Harding responds by stating, "Oh, actually I do. I always wanted to be a hairdresser, but my mother forced me into the fiercely competitive live or die world of figure skating." I tried to see if I could find any information to back up that idea that she always wanted to be a hairdresser. I couldn't find anything in any articles that I read, but it may have been something that she mentioned in a live interview, so possibly that was a joke being told at her expense, not sure. She then steps up onto a stepladder and asks if Blood Wulf has any last words or other than "why me," which is another joke about Nancy Kerrigan. After she was attacked, she was just on the floor screaming "why." And when she cuts off some of Blood Wulf's hair, it causes a transformation, which sends him into a berserk rage and turns him into more of a wolfman monster as we see his claws grow and his face transform and his muscles get bigger and his ears come up to more of like a canine pointed ear. And he then breaks free of all of his bindings and tries to take a swipe at Tanya Harding, who ducks out of the way. We once again then jump back to the dome where Dr. Gale commands Smood to find the coordinates to the Dark Orb that they sent Blood Wulf to and get the teleporter set up to get all of them there. Smood finds out that the exact spot on the Dark Orb that Blood Wulf was teleported to is called the Hideous Torture Chamber. So he's a little bit reluctant, but Dr. Gale says just do it, and then tells Ogo to grab the synth body of the fishwoman whose head he knocked off, and as many guns as he can carry, and bring those along for the ride. She's then interrupted by the regime commander and his second-in-command, who are like, well, hey, what about us? And Dr. Gale responds by stating, well, you've tried to kill us several times in the brief time that we've known you, so how about I return the favor? And vaporizes the top half of both of their bodies. She then orders all of the team to rush through the transporter to teleport out as we see the dome finally give way and millions of gallons of seawater pour inside of the dome, causing havoc and destruction as Dr. Gale narrowly escapes being the last one through the transporter, as we see even outside of the dome is subject to the horror of the dome being broken, as Beanie and Cecil, along with a few innocent mer people, are all being sucked into the dome's torrent and the whirlpool that it's creating. Back on the Dark Orb space station, the now monstrously transformed Blood Wulf grabs Eckhart and lifts him up into the air by his arms as Eckhart tries to say, oh, you don't want to mess with me. I'm trained in all these different martial arts and my hands are registered weapons. And Blood Wulf responds by ripping both of his arms off. He's then countered by Galuli, who states, put those arms down, I've got you, as he points a gun at him. And Blood Wulf takes him out quickly by smacking him across both of his shins with one of Eckhart's arms. Galuli collapses onto the floor screaming, "Why me?" much in the same way that Nancy Kerrigan did. And Blood Wulf's mom looks on, stating, "That's my boy, he's going to get us out of here," as the two regime soldiers decide that they need to take her out and end this quickly. Back down in the torture chamber, Tanya Harding holds up a figure skate stating, "Please don't hurt me, I'm not bad, I'm just portrayed that way by the vicious news media." And Blood Wulf responds by smashing her head into the wall. This immediately takes her out and also opens the door to the torture chamber. Blood Wulf then walks out, and his mother tries to get his attention. Unfortunately, the glass that separated the room she's in from the torture chamber is soundproof. The two guards then decide they're going to take her out. However, she responds by biting one of them and then swinging to avoid a laser blast from the second. Oddly enough, the part here where Tanya is talking about, I'm not as bad as I'm being portrayed, is there's a small grain of truth to that, in the sense that while she was aware of the plot against Nancy Kerrigan, she wasn't the one who organized or carried out that plot. That was largely her ex-husband and her bodyguard who were responsible for all of the planning, getting the money for payment, hiring the guy to actually attack Nancy. And, they were really the ones who planned out and carried out everything. And while she was aware of it, she wasn't really the one who planned anything or carried out anything. And she was the one left holding the bag by the media. She's the one that gets all the blame. She's the one who basically had her whole life turned upside down and ruined, as despite the fact that the other men served some prison time, they've been largely forgotten and could just go back to, living in society as normal everyday people, whereas Tanya Harding will be forever remembered as this evil, jealous woman who tried to sabotage another figure skater. And again, she's not blameless in any of it, but it does seem rather odd that she's the one who all the blame falls on when her role in the plot was actually the most minimal of anyone's. The stray laser blast from the regime soldier bursts through the glass at the exact same moment that Dr. Gale and the rest of the gang have teleported into the torture chamber. The two regime guards see them and immediately open fire. Gale returns fire, killing both of the guards and accidentally shooting the chain that was holding Blood Wulf's mother. We then see Blood Wulf's mother drop to the ground as Smood states, "Oh my god, Tawanda Redwolf," who I think this is the first time we hear her actual name. She is then on the ground in a heap, still bound, and says, "Yeah, it's me. Thanks for catching me." And Smood tries to respond by stating, "Oh, well, I've got a bad servo in my right shoulder, blah, blah, blah." And Tawanda states, "Listen, it's fine, whatever. Did you at least bring Ogo with you?" Ogo states, "Yeah, I'm right here." And Tawanda is shocked to see the condition of his body and states what happened. But before he can respond, Dr. Gale grabs his head, pulls it off of the battered and nearly destroyed body, and throws it on top of the synthetic body that belonged to the fish woman in the dome. She then states, "There, how do you feel now?" And Ogo's like, "I mean, fine, but I'm now on a woman's body." And Dr. Gale states, "Look, we didn't have any choice. Your other body was literally falling apart, and this one's pretty much brand new. I know it's not necessarily what you wanted, but honestly, is it really that bad?" And Ogo has to admit, okay, fine, you've got a point, but this isn't really what I had in mind for my next body. In another part of the station, Blood Wulf has finally tracked down Vast Deference and found him inside of his inner sanctum, which is some sort of weird MC Escher style room where physics don't apply and gravity seems to be more of a suggestion than a rule. He's still being accompanied by one of his subordinates who continues to shine the flashlight up at him from underneath. As he starts to go into a long-winded speech about what he's going to do to Blood Wulf, Blood Wulf cuts him off and states, listen, shut the hell up, man. I've heard this all before by dozens of other people, and the thing that they have in common with you is that they're all as dead as you're about to be. He then lunges forward and attacks Vass, knocking him away, and Vass states, I can't help it. I can't stop myself from pontificating and vomiting out a cacophony of verbiage into the silence, which is just a ridiculous way to even state, hey, I can't help myself. I just have to talk nonstop. And Blood Wulf responds by stating, wait, man, are you about to puke? Vass then responds by stating that my mouth is open and I can't close it, as he launches his own counterattack, socking Blood Wulf and knocking him away. Blood Wulf, however, responds by stating, yeah, I mean, that's all fine and dandy, man, but seriously, you're not going to puke, are you? He then grabs Vass by the cape and slams him down into the ground, stating, this is where it ends. I'm tired of you. And Vass states, oh no, I'm going to have my revenge for what you did to me. And Blood Wulf responds by stating, I don't even know who you are. And Vass gets in his face and states, you took everything from me, and I'm going to make sure that I end you by my own hands so that you can never repeat these mistakes again throughout the rest of the, space of the regime. However, at this point, Blood Wulf wants to know exactly what it is that this guy is talking about and what their history may be, so he grabs his helmet and rips it clean off of his head. In another part of the space station, we see Dr. Gale, Tawanda Red Wolf, and Ogo burst through the doors of a hangar bay in a Charlie's Angels style pose and begin opening fire on all of the guards. They quickly find a ship that looks big enough for all of them to be able to fit into, hop in, start it up, and immediately zoom out through the hangar bay to try and make their escape. However, they are immediately pursued by several regime fighters as Tawanda opens fire with one of the gun turrets trying to blow up their pursuers, taking out one of the ships in the process, as Gale asks her if Blood Wulf was able to teleport out the way they got in. Red Wolf, his mother, states, no, he was the one that was responsible for all of the carnage that you teleported into, and he was in hot pursuit of Vass. But she also states that he'll have no trouble getting out of this situation, as he's more than capable of handling himself, but then also states, you better be okay, boy, which leads us to believe that while she does have confidence in her son's abilities, she is nonetheless still his mother and is worried about his well-being. However, at this point, the conversation is interrupted by Ogo, who states that they have several other craft in hot pursuit, and he's just picked up 2 more craft that are heading straight for them. However, the 2 craft that are heading for them don't attack them. They instead attack the regime fighters, and they then look out the windows and see exactly who it is that is coming to their aid, as Smood immediately recognizes the 2 of them. And Blood Wolf's mother says, oh, well, I mean, it took him long enough to get here, but at least they're here. And Ogo is kind of like, wait a minute, what is all this about? As we see one of the people who's aided them stating, yeah, maybe we're a little late, but we just pulled your fat asses out of the fryer. By the way, is that boy of yours with you? Meanwhile, back in the room that contains Vass and Blood Wulf, we now see Vass's face for the first time. And upon seeing his face, Blood Wulf exclaims, Gaiman wank, as he smacks his head. And apparently Vass is supposed to be a satirical character who's making fun of Neil Gaiman, and his physical appearance is supposed to be that of a character named Dream from the Sandman series. I cannot confirm any of this. This is simply something I read online. I don't know for sure if that's exactly correct. Maybe. But if it's not, I do apologize. I'm not trying to get this wrong. This was just what I could find. Blood Wulf then states, I thought you were dead. And Gaiman Wank explains, well, I got better. At this point, they're interrupted by one of the regime soldiers stating the prisoner Red Wolf has escaped. And Vass, aka Gaiman Wank, starts to go on another long-winded speech, but at this point, Blood Wulf has had enough as he rushes him and punches him, knocking him back into a computer panel. At this point, Gaiman Wank starts to put his head in his hands, stating, "Oh no, now it's all ruined." And Blood Wulf is stating, "Hey, it's not, I haven't even started to kill you yet. What are you talking about?" And Gaiman Wank explains that he was just knocked into the self-destruct button for the entire space station, and that now the whole station and everyone on it are going to be blown to smithereens. At this point, Blood Wulf becomes enraged and grabs him, throwing him up against the wall, stating, "Why in the hell would you ever build a space station where the self-destruct button is just openly on a panel that anyone could just accidentally knock into?" However, he fails to notice that there is an out-of-control fighter that was damaged by his mother careening towards the window of the room that they're currently in. The fighter then smashes through the window, creating a vacuum that sucks both Blood Wulf and Gaiman Wank out into the depths of space, as the two of them are just along for the ride at this point. As Blood Wulf starts to float in outer space, he thinks to himself that this day has just been getting more and more awful when suddenly he's hit by an object. He looks through the windshield to see a familiar face as someone in a different panel states, "Is that part of your brood, Khalifa?" And he then realizes that this is none other than his grandmother, Khalifa, and her girlfriend, Myrtle. His grandmother is obviously supposed to be a caricature of a lesbian biker, and she states, "I don't know why he's floating around out here naked, but then again, what are you going to tell all these youngins? I say put clothes on, but they just do their own thing." He then hops onto Myrtle's space motorcycle and tries to start signaling her that the space station is about to explode. His grandmother asks what he's on about, and Myrtle states that he's either trying to tell them that the station is about to explode, or he's calling Khalifa fat. Khalifa tells Myrtle that she's walking on thin ice, and then instructs Dr. Gale and Red Wolf that they all need to get out of here, and so that they don't get caught in the explosion. And at this point, Myrtle asks, "What do you think caused all this?" And Khalifa states, "Oh, someone probably put the self-destruct button in a really easily accessible place and accidentally hit it. You know how these people are." We then see the station explode as Myrtle states, "Boy, that's a pretty explosion. Reminds me of the Big Bang." And Khalifa states, "Yeah, that's just how things go out here in outer space." And we then see that Myrtle is anxious to go back to Blood Wulf's homeworld and meet up with all of his kids, who she absolutely adores. And Khalifa states, "Yeah, well, don't try any funny business with him along the way." But Myrtle reminds her that he's hopelessly devoted to all of his wives and that she'd never have a chance, which is kind of funny that, Blood Wulf is a practicing polygamist, but is also like a devoted husband. It's like, yeah, he's got 6 wives, but he ain't going to cheat on a single one of them. We are then teleported to Blood Wulf's home world of Lupar, I think is how you say it, as he's regaling all of his wives with the story of exactly what happened, stating that it turned out this guy was from Rambovia and I thought I had killed him before. His 2-headed wife then asks, if he's positive that he's dead, and Blood Wulf responds by stating, "I suppose, unless his suit protects him from the vacuums of space." We then see Ogo walking over with a bunch of hamburgers to give to the group, and he asks Dr. Gale, "How long am I going to be stuck in this body?" And Gale said that they're going to try and locate something that's more suitable for him, but she asks, "Is it really so bad being stuck as a woman?" And Ogo responds by stating, "Oh no, I have lots to explore," in a kind of perverted sense. We then see that Smoot is speaking with Myrtle and Khalifa, and they're kind of taunting him, stating, "Your body is kind of ridiculous too." But Smoot responds by stating, "I happen to like the way I look." And Khalifa states, "Yeah, I guess it isn't too bad. I mean, you do have big nuts," referring to the 2 large nuts that are holding his pelvis together. But it is kind of a phallical joke that's being made in the artistry. At this point, one of Blood Wulf's children by the name of Sachet walks up to him and asks him, "Do you like that Dorothy Gale lady?" And he says, "Well, I mean," and then she interrupts by stating, "Well, the other moms really seem to like her a lot. Maybe you should marry her too." And Blood Wulf states, "Well, she did ask me to go help her out with something on her home planet of Earth." We then reach the last panel where one of Blood Wulf's other children states, well, I guess we've reached the last page of the story here, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't write in to request that we do more Blood Wulf stuff. See you soon. And then it just ends. Kind of a weird ending, but then again, the whole story was weird start to finish, so I can't say that this is out of character for the writing. We then see an advertisement for a cover that was done by Rob Liefeld and Stephen Platt for the number 3 issue of Overstreet Fan. I gotta admit that for as ridiculously over the top as this cover is, it actually looks okay. I kind of dig it. I mean, obviously the weaponry is ridiculous and, it's just nonstop veins and muscles and gear and armor and questionable fashion choices, but it looks cool, man. I gotta give them that. It does look pretty neat. We then see a big 2-page ad for Bloodpool, and if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you know that we have seen this same ad at least half a dozen times at this point, so I'm not going to dwell on it for too long. We then get 2 individual pages advertising Prophet number 1. Now, as of recording this video, I have not reached the point where Prophet breaks off of Youngblood into his own ongoing series. But when I do, I will be making videos about Prophet because I like Prophet a lot. And he is kind of an important character in the early days of Extreme Studios. So keep your eyes peeled for when those videos go live. We then see a 2-page vertical ad for the Glory Evangeline team-up comic, which we've seen this ad before, and I still don't know if I actually have any issues of this, so I'm going to have to go through my collection, and if I don't, dig through dollar boxes and hope that I find some of them. But keep an eye out. If I ever get it, I will make videos on it. We then see an advertisement for both Chapel number 1 and Crypt number 1. I have not made videos about either one of these characters' solo series as of making this video. I only have a handful of issues of Chapel, and I mean, maybe 1 or 2 issues at most of Crypt. I'm going to have to keep an eye out for that. And the ones that I do have are just random numbers. At least Chapel, I think I have like maybe issues like 1 through 3 at the very least. So I'm going to have to try and find more of those as well. But in the future, I plan on making videos about both of these characters, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for Bone. And I'll be the first to admit, I know next to nothing about Bone. I mean, I know of his existence. I've seen the Bone collected editions before, but I've never actually sat down and read any of that comic, so I can't speak much to it. But if you have read it and have anything to say about it, feel free to talk about it in the comments below. And that was Blood Wulf number 4. I really think that this was a pretty decent ending to this miniseries. Sure, it was crazy and weird and nonsensical in places, but then again, that same description could be given to literally every issue of this miniseries. Blood Wulf is a wild ride, and there's something to be said for the irreverence of the character and the goofball nature of the story. But then again, it is definitely in that same vein of Lobo, which it's clearly trying to emulate in many respects, but also like Deadpool and other characters who blur that line between serious hardcore action and just completely off the wall zaniness. I did, get a little bit of a laugh on how much research I had to do about Tanya Harding and the whole plot against Nancy Kerrigan. Obviously, I remember when all of those stories were going on. I was alive at the time, and it was just nationwide news. But I had forgotten a lot of the details about it and had to go on a bit of a deep dive. Strangely enough, I did find out in some of that research, purely on accident, that Tanya Harding also is the holder of a land speed record in the vintage gas coupe class. She drove a 1931 mostly stock Ford Model A at a speed of 97 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats. Yeah, I'm not making that up. That's a real fact. Tanya Harding, the woman who was involved in a plot to cripple a competing figure skater so that she could weasel her way into the Olympics and potentially win a gold medal, and then hopefully get a bunch of endorsement deals so that she and her ex-husband and her bodyguard could get rich, has a land speed record. We live in a crazy world, folks. That's all I can say. It's just weird. And I'm actually kind of happy that they made these goofy jokes about Tonya Harding and the plot to take out Nancy Kerrigan in this book, because that's what led me to finding out all this other weird information that I would have never known otherwise. But then again, these are just my opinions. You may not enjoy the comedy and humor of Blood Wulf. You might have thought it was stupid to include someone who was in a nefarious plot to harm another individual. But if that's the case, it's all right, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.